Well, this is Baruch here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. I'm still trying to find that good music. And I'm going to different places. This is a song called Return to Oneness by Kev Thompson. Let's go over here to Yaakov Kronenberg here again. We're studying the answers to those say that astrology really is not a true science and that it's not Jewish. So we're in the middle of a deep discussion about what Jewish astrology is and exactly how does it work. And this is similar to the story of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our father, whom God told that he would become great and have 12 children. Everything would be all right. And the next day he worried again because he thought that maybe he did have a sin and this would be nullified. So even if God comes and gives you the prophecy, you still have to worry because maybe you are going to mess it up, do something wrong, and lose your good mazel. We find that this art is an obligation on all who know it to strengthen it so that his belief will be strengthened as well as his fear of heaven, and he will realize his prayers and his righteousness at all times. At all times one has to realize that even though according to the testimony of the planets, there may be good decrees, you still have to pray and do good deeds so as not to mess up your good mazel. Sometimes you see that people have good horoscopes, but they just don't fulfill it because they messed up somewhere along the way. Now, you have to learn these two things: the motion of the planets and the meanings of these motions. The wisdom of the Jews is that they can overcome the planetary influences and they should be learned. In other words, everybody should know their birth chart to have an idea where the good things and bad things are. And the calculations of the seasons, which is astronomy, should also be done. Not only the constellations, which is astrology, because in order to become an astrologer, one has to know astronomy. If you don't know where the planets are and how we're moving, and in the old days there were no computer printouts from NASA which tell you where all the planets are, you therefore would not be able to know their meanings and decrees. And of these two sciences that are attached to the fear of heaven, it is the wisdom of the stars that Israel is obligated to study and engage in. So these are the first two branches of astrology which Rabbi Abraham showed are perfectly legitimate to study. Now, he's going to talk about some of the branches in astrology that are forbidden for the Jews to practice, this also, and non-Jews as well. There are other sciences which are part of astrology that are dependent on the planets instead of God. In other words, they don't recognize Yud Kei Vav Kei. As we read on in this book, you're going to see he's going to get a lot more specific, which most of the nations engaged in, and the Jewish people were not permitted to engage in them. This is because they connected to idolatry, and they degrade one's fear of heaven and a relationship with God. This is because all of the nations that believe that planets benefit or destroy with their own knowledge and power will eventually add to their own wickedness and brazenness until it appears to them that they are serving and making offerings to the planets themselves that help them. Try to co-opt the planet. And it went up in the hearts of many because of an impure spirit which came to them from the planets, who command them and warned them and taught them that they must be served. So that's what these people said. These evil ones caused their generation to sin. They made idols for them and they statues to be served, worshipped, and they taught them how the planet should be served. And they enacted all kinds of evil ceremonies to be performed before them. These false prophets of idols, are called in Arabic Etzielvati, which means the founders of the ceremonies. And their students who performed these profane religious ceremonies were called El-Adba, meaning the ones who were drawn after the evil. And each of the idolatrous nations, the worshippers of idolatry to whom they dedicated themselves and enacted forms of evil worship, were called in Arabic Mustona Be'el Kavi, meaning those who draw down the powers. Now, where am I? I guess I'm way, way, way beyond where it could be seen. Let me see how I'm going to do this. I'm going to work this out. I got to kind of get this up. So I'm sorry I get a little involved in this, and I don't really follow. This book is real big. One of the things is that Rabbi Yaakov never had a lot of money, so therefore this is really probably the least expensive form of publishing that he could find. So that's what it is. Let me bring this up a little bit, make it easier that way. Now, so he says that, so we see that Jews cannot be in any way connected with idolatry, which is a very severe sin, since it influences one not to believe in the true God, and instead to believe in materiality, and attributing godly powers to it. It is also not permitted to the non-Jew to follow this idolatry. So this also not forbidden, it's forbidden for everybody, not to say that it's not around, as stipulated in Noahide laws of the Bible. But this type of idolatry is hard to imagine today. We must remember the source in the Talmud, the tractate in the Sanhedrin, which brings down the events from the Second Temple period, when the prophets enacted a special request and prayed to God to nullify the desires for Jews to serve idolatry. And so God nullified the desire for idolatry. And due to that, the desire to worship idols today is not as strong as it used to be then. And it is said that if people of today had lived back at the time of idol worship, the pull was so strong they would run after those idols too, even though those idols degrade one's fear of heaven. If you believe in the stars, and if you think that they implement the decrees out of their own will, then eventually you would come to worship the stars themselves. So as we said at the beginning of the letter, there is nothing wrong in astrology for the Jews, because the Jews know that the planets are just agents of God. And these planets' energies don't have a free will, or any powers to decree things. The stars don't use their own rational judgment, and all the decrees and nullification decrees are all from God, from Yud-Ke, Vav-Ke, from Hashem. But the idol worshippers say that the planets apparently decree things, and then they went one step further and said if the planets have the power to decree things, then the next step would be obviously to please and worship the planets, to try to modify and pacify them. And so that's what they did. And you see in India, the great planets, in India, the great planets the Indian astrologers that we are, use mantras for the planets. So if it is a season of Saturn, let's say, which is Capricorn, that was just the last month, which is also Aquarius, which is this month, and the planet causes you trouble, you would have to say a mantra many times to appease Saturn, so it would not give you such difficulty in life. But we learned that the planets themselves do not decree. It is not in their power. They are just messengers of God. So Rabbi Abraham Bar Chia repeats this point in a different way. He says, in order to show you that was the point, that one of the forbidden forms of astrology was where they dedicated idols to the planets with different ceremonies, different theology, different times and materials, and how to worship them. Planets don't do anything besides being messengers who deliver messages. Worshipping them is nonsense, which came out of wrong beliefs. This branch of astrology, the worshipping of planets, is forbidden, of course, to Jews and also non-Jews. And if you look at the books of the nations during the Middle Ages, you see they have many books on this subject, and you will see that even in the Western traditions, they did it. We see that people in the ancient West also built altars for the planets and tried to appease them in different ways. Really. This is Baruch Fleischman. This is the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. This ending music over here from Return to Oneness by Kev Thompson.